Should the D-backs target a top pitcher like Yamamoto, or should they settle for a guy like Mike Clevenger, playing a little game of in or out with the top pitchers on this year's free agent market?
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account, or look up Locked On Diamondbacks at both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. I've been covering the Dbacks since 2020, and now they enter one of the biggest off seasons in their franchise history on the heels of a World Series. And on today's podcast, we'll be playing a little game of in or out on the top free agent pitchers that the Dbacks should consider targeting. But before we get into any of that, I just want to say today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now let's jump into the podcast. And the way I broke down this game is we're going to do each segment by tiers. Segment number 1 will be the A tier of the free agent pitchers. Segment 2, B tier, and segment 3 will be C tier pitchers. So let's first start with the cream of the crop. And the A tier, these are guys where if we added them, it would be a win to the rotation. But there are some players in this tier that I like more than others based on multiple variables. But if the D-backs came away with any of these A-tier pitchers, you couldn't deny it would be a win for the rotation. So let's play our little game of in or out free agent pitcher edition. The first guy I want to discuss, Yamamoto, coming over from Japan, one of the most heralded pitchers coming over from there in a very long time, even more than a Kodai Senga. He's projected, and all these money projections are by MLB Trade Rumors, he's projected to get a 9-year, $225 million deal. And guess what? For someone that's 25 years old, with the way he's talked about, I am in on Yamamoto. He hits the market with 3 consecutive sub-2 ERA seasons in Japan. He's crushed it over there. And if you just want to compare him to Senga, considering that's like the most recent comparable body of work we got, Senga, his final season in the NPB, 1.94 ERA, 27.5% strikeout rate. And Yamamoto is considered better than what Senga did that final season. Senga, coming out of NPB, was still considered maybe a mid-rotation guy, maybe a bullpen dude on the highest level in Major League Baseball. We saw what he just did with New York Mets, sub-3 ERA, going to get some Cy Young votes, and unanimously, Yamamoto is considered a better pitcher than Kodai Senga, who as a rookie is going to finish probably top 6 or 7 in the Cy Young race. Yamamoto, I love. He projects to be a high-end, big league starter, potential number 2. Might be a little bit smaller than your normal pitcher, but considering his elite strikeout numbers, elite walk rate, the command he has, the arsenal he has, his age, the track record that he put up in Japan, I think guys like this are just a can't miss most of the time. When I think of all the Japanese pitchers who have come over recently, with the Sengas and the Tanakas of the world, when those guys are scouted and are talked about as much as a Yamamoto is, those guys are usually can't miss prospects. So Yamamoto, I would sign up for the 9 years, 225, maybe not that much money, but a little bit less, and I would be pretty happy. 7 years, 180, I could do that. Aaron Nola, I think I'm out on an Aaron Nola. Don't get me wrong. I love him. He kind of killed the D-backs this past postseason, right? The D-backs did a little bit of work against him in the second start, but I just think He's projected 6 years, 150. Actually, I think that's too much money for a guy on the wrong side of 30. If you want to make the positive case for him, eats a ton of innings, like his stuff. This is a guy who has like 180 plus inning seasons under his belt. Like one of the most durable guys in Major League Baseball. Like you can at least count on that. Is going to be productive and he's going to eat a lot of innings. But he's a low velocity pitcher, which I don't like for someone that's aging. I think when your velocity is already starting in the low 92 to 93 range, you need to have elite secondary stuff. And he does have good secondary stuff, but I just don't. I just would want to stay away from that potential decline. And also, if you look at his last few seasons, he's been one of those guys like every other year. He's been good. I just think Aaron Nola, very good pitcher. I just wouldn't want to be the team to pay him. But if the D-backs did end up with Aaron Nola, best believe I would be absolutely ecstatic. How about Blake Snell? Another guy like Aaron Nola, really good, but on the wrong side of 30, and I just think way too expensive. I'm also out on a Blake Snell. Like for the variables, like in a vacuum, yes, but for the variables, like the contract and age, it's a no. 7 years, $200 million projected. And I just don't think the D-backs need to spend money on a top line starter unless I think unless I like the variables there, like a Yamamoto. A guy like a Blake Snell or Aaron Nola, I don't want to spend the top line money on those kind of guys. Yamamoto, he's still in his mid 20s, so I think it makes sense for him. Blake Snell, 31, 32. I don't think I want to pony up 7 years, 200 million for him, especially for a guy who's had an up and down career. When you look at his baseball reference, there are some seasons above 4 ERA, and then some seasons where he's been a Cy Young Award winner. This is a 2-time Cy Young Award winner because he will win it this year, and he's going to win it in 2 different leagues. Like it's one of the most historical feats we've ever seen. And even with that being said, Blake Snell is still someone that I don't have a super ton of trust and confidence in. Likes to walk a ton of dudes. First year reaching 130 innings since 2018, which was the last time he won a Cy Young. There are just too many red flags for me when it comes to a Blake Snell. Yes, if the D-backs sign him, I would be happy. But as it currently stands, I'm out on Blake Snell. How about Jordan Montgomery? After seeing him pitch against the D-backs and getting his team to the World Series, it's a resounding yes. He's someone that I've talked about for the last couple months and even at the deadline when I looked at potential free agent and trade deadline targets for this D-backs team. I've said on this podcast multiple times, I would love a top to mid-tier rotation starter, number 2 or number 3, who is your number 2 or number 3, but can pitch like a number 1 or number 2 in the postseason. Jordan Montgomery is that guy. I think a perfect number 3 starter right behind a Kelly and Gallen, and someone that we've seen pitch to a 2.9 ERA in the postseason. Lefty too, which would be perfect after Gallen and Kelly. Great postseason run. Know he can handle playoff pressure, especially on the big stage. And his velocity has been going upwards the last 3 years as well. I love that for Jordan Montgomery. He's projected 6 years, 150 million. I don't think Jordan Montgomery will get that. If he does, it's because of the positional value in this free agent market. Not the strongest free agent class we've ever had. So if he does get a deal like that, I think it's more about the lack of high-end quality pitchers as opposed to Jordan Montgomery being worth that amount of money. But if you could get him for 4 to 5 years at a reasonable contract, I think the D-backs should go out and do something like that. And then the last guy that I want to talk about, segment number 1, is Sonny Gray, who I also give a yes to. Is he older? Yes. Did that hold me back with the Blake Snells and the Aaron Nolas? Yes, but because he's like 33, 34, I don't think you have to give him that 7-year deal like a Blake Snell or Aaron Nola. Like if you could get him at 3 years, 2 years, like I would do that. 2 to 3 years with an option after that would make me pretty happy. He's projected 4 years, 90 million. If we could do 2 or 3 years with an option, I would like that. Sonny Gray, I think, pitches better when he's in a little bit of a smaller market. Don't think he's a big market New York Yankees type pitcher because that's when he struggled the most. But you get him in a rotation like Arizona where the pressure's low. I think he could be perfect mid-rotation guy, perfect veteran squad, young squad leader. Like Sonny Gray is coming off the Cy Young season. which could make him slightly more expensive. But I do like the fact that he's coming off a really good year, good strikeout rate, good ground ball numbers. Maybe it adds a little bit more to his overall dollar sign, but I would rather him come off a good year than a bad year. And Sonny Gray is someone that I would target in this year's free agent class if I'm the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now we'll talk about some B tier free agent pitchers that the D-backs should go out there and sign. And if you want to make a little wager on who the D-backs should sign and who you think they will sign this offseason, then why not put your money where your mouth is on FanDuel Sportsbook, because score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 of bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. When the Lakers are playing, I take that money line. I take the LeBron over on points, and I'm done with the AD rebound, knowing he gets hurt, like we just saw in the most recent game against the Heat. So give me Austin Reeves also over on points. So LeBron over, AR over, Lakers money line. The money line part has been the toughest part of the bet so far, but I think it's going to start paying out in the future. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And now let's look at some B tier free agent pitchers and discuss whether we're in or out as potential targets for the Arizona Diamondbacks to go after. These are guys who would probably help the rotation, but definitely have some major red flags in either the short term or the long term. But you can't deny, if we added a couple of these guys, you'd be like, yeah, you know what? I am kind of happy that we got that dude for the rotation. So the first guy I want to talk about, another Japanese pitcher. I just want you guys to know I'm all in on Japan. I'm all in on these international guys. I feel like the market right now for these international players, like, I think the dudes in the international waters right now are just can't miss dudes. And when they come over, I think the game in other countries is as close to the majors as it's ever been. That's why we saw the WBC and the US lose. Like, the talent in other countries is strong. And when they put up these special numbers in other countries, you can translate it to American baseball now. And Shoto Imanaga is another guy, not considered as good as Yamamoto, but he did have better strikeout and walk numbers than a Yamamoto. The only issue is he gives up a few more home runs, but Imanaga, another dude, stud. We saw him pitch against the U.S. back in March. He's not afraid to already go against American-born major leaguers. 7-4 last year in the NPB, 2.8 ERA, 174 strikeouts, 24 walks, and 148 innings pitched. He's also a lefty, throws 90 to 94 on the fastball, got good movement. He just knows how to pitch. I'm not going to lie and act like I've seen him a ton. I haven't watched a ton of tape, but from the scouting and what everyone's saying, he seems like another mid-rotation starter, your number 3, number 4 guy. And the D-backs are looking for a number 3. So if he can be your perfect number 3, number 4 starter, him and Brandon Pfaadt, I would love that in the D-backs rotation. Give me Imanaga. Next up, Eduardo Rodriguez. I am in on E-Rod. When you have a cool nickname like that, how can you not? Anybody with a nickname that is something Rod is usually a beast. Listen, I know everyone hates A-Rod. He is still one of the greatest baseball players we've ever seen, despite the PED use. K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez, was a stud closer back in the day. Eduardo Rodriguez, probably not as good as those two people, but he is coming off a career season. Should have been an all-star with the Tigers. Also a lefty in 11 starts before getting hurt this past year. 2.13 ERA with a 25% K rate. Decided to opt out of his 5-year deal just 2 years in because he knows he's going to make a little bit more money potentially this offseason. projected, 4 years, 82. I like Eduardo Rodriguez a lot. He's someone, when he's right, can eat innings as well. He is someone that we've seen be a big inning eater before. He's also someone that can get some decent strikeouts as well. Like I said, 25% K rate when he was healthy pre-injury this past year. Dealt with COVID in 2020, but seems to be better now. I like Eduardo Rodriguez. Good the final 2 seasons in Boston. Weird the first year in Detroit, dealing with injury as well, but good this past year in Detroit. I love Erod, and I would love for the D-backs to go after Erod. Marcus Stroman, though, I'm a little out on Marcus Stroman. 2 years, 44 projected. I just wouldn't, even if it's a short-term overpay, which I'm usually okay with. I'm just not super in on Marcus Stroman. I just don't love the vibes there. I just get some of these calls that I'm making on these free agent pitchers, like it's just my gut. Some of it, I can look at the analytics. I can have two guys. You could do the player profile where you take the name away, player A versus player B. The stats, the numbers, everything could be the same, but then you show me the names. I could just like one guy more than the other. And Marcus Stroman, it's just a guy that I have a negative gut reaction to. All-star first half of the season with the Chicago Cubs, sub 2.5 ERA. Like he was really good the first half. You remember this past year, looked like he was on his way with a Zach Allen to potentially winning the Cy Young Award, but then dealt with a whole bunch of injuries, came back. Those injuries affected his performance and eventually tried to, eventually he was moved to the bullpen to see if that could potentially right the ship and get Marcus Stroman back on track. Didn't happen. And right now, Marcus Stroman, aging veteran, fastball velocity below 92. Like if it's a 2-year deal, sure, you could convince me Marcus Stroman could be good for the D-backs. But 3-4 year deal, I'm out on Marcus Stroman. I think he could be too much money, and he just someone I'm staying away from when I look at his potential decline coming up in the near future. How about Lucas Giolito? Another guy I'm just out on. If you asked me 2 years ago, he would have been the perfect mid-rotation target that I would have went after for the D-backs. Heck, even after the poor season he had last year, I would have told you, you know what? Working with Brent Strom, maybe he has a bounce back and looks good with the D-backs in 2023. But now, back-to-back down seasons, I'm just out on Lucas Giolito. Cave up the league leading amount of home runs, 41 in the American League. Fastball velocity has been down. He's trending in the wrong direction when you look at his career. I'm just another dude, bad vibes, don't like the way his career is heading right now. Lucas Giolito, you asked me a couple years ago, I would have been in. You asked me right now, I'm out. I'm sorry, Giolito. And then the final dude that we need to discuss in segment number 2 is Michael Wacha, because for me, Wacha is a yes. Projected 3 years, $36 million. Listen, Walker's a little weird because doesn't have great K rate numbers, which is in the modern baseball, right? You want someone that has good strikeout stuff, good swing and miss stuff, and that's not Michael Wacha. He's not going to generate a ton of strikeouts. He's not going to generate a ton of swing and miss, but I think he just one of those old school classic dudes that just knows how to pitch effectively, pitch to your strengths, and just generate outs. His health is a concern. He doesn't pitch a ton of innings, but he's another dude. When he's right, I think he's really good. It just depends how right can he be. Maybe you don't want to make him the only piece to your rotation. If you add him, maybe you got to pair him with someone else. But I do think Michael Wacha is really good. And if he did get 3 years for 36, I think that's a pretty reasonable price for how good and productive I think Michael Wacha can be. Then I think I forgot to say the projections for Giolito. 2 years, 44, and for Imanaga, 5 years, 85 million. Now we'll talk about some C tier pitchers that the D-backs should target this free agency. Welcome back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's look at some C tier pitchers for the D-backs to go after this free agency. We'll play our little game of in or out, of course. And for the C tier, these are players that I would not be disappointed if the D-backs added them, but I would be disappointed if this was the only move that the D-backs did. The D-backs added one of these dudes and said, all right, that was our big splash in the rotation. Then I would be upset. If these guys were added as a secondary, tertiary, depth piece added to the rotation / long reliever mix, then I would be happy. Your number 6 starter, your extra starter in your rotation, your number 5 starter in your rotation, I would be happy. But if you told me this is the one starter we added this offseason to be our number 3 starter, that would make me upset. But enough filibustering. Let's get into the game. First dude, Kenta Maeda. I have a yes down for him. Projected 2 years, $36 million. Health is a major concern for Maeda. You probably can't expect 30 starts from him. You'll be lucky if you get 25 starts. But I do think when he's healthy, he can look pretty good as a pitcher. Just last season when he was healthy, in his final 16 starts, 3.39 ERA, can still be productive. He is a little bit older, 36 years old, but I kind of like that age because I think it would make him the perfect short-term option. Get him that 2-year deal, get him in Arizona, then get him out relatively quickly. Short-term window to try and win now, or just depth piece in the back end of your rotation. I wouldn't mind Maeda as like our number 5 starter in rotation. I'm a yes on him. Next up, Seth Lugo. Yes, kind of a weird dude. First full season as a starter after pitching many years as a setup reliever type dude, but very good first full season as a starter. 3.57 ERA, projected 3 years, $42 million. We just saw him in the NL West with the San Diego Padres. Maybe he's a little bit cheaper than the projections because scouts could potentially think one hit wonder, right? Maybe he's vanilla ice, ice baby. Maybe he's not really a starter, could potentially still be good as a reliever, but the season he's coming off of, maybe he wants another shot at being a starter, and maybe he wants some starter money as well. I wouldn't be mad at him if he wanted to go that route. Hard single ball pitcher with solid K rate and walk rate. If he doesn't break the bank, get him around 10 million a year. I wouldn't mind adding Seth Lugo as a back end rotation starter. This next guy, I think, could be the best pitcher in the C tier and have some serious potential upside if he can have a bounce back. He already kind of had a bounce back this past season, but maybe bounce back to the ways he was pre-Tommy John. I'm talking about Mike Clevinger. I am in on Clevinger. Projected 2 years, $26 million. He was a year removed from Tommy John last year and looked a lot better. Final season San Diego wasn't all that. Last season, first year with Chicago, a lot better. Strikeout numbers were solid. Looked a lot better in terms of just how he looked on the mound, how he pitched, his arsenal, his stuff looked better last season. His fastball velocity still sat there around his career average. Probably needs to be better with the spin rates when you look at some of his stuff, but at least the velo is still there. This is someone that's been good for most of his career. 3 of his last 4 years, he's been a very good pitcher, sub 4 ERA, and I think he could potentially have a monster bounce back in 2024. And he is someone that I would like to add to this D-backs rotation. The next guy I wouldn't want to add, though, Michael Lorenzen. Big no. When we talk about vibes and my gut check, no one gets a bigger no than Michael Lorenzen. 2 years, $22 million projected. I think what he did with the Tigers, all smoke and mirrors, very fraudish with what he did last season, because this is someone career 4.11 ERA, a bunch of really down seasons the last few years. Then finally last year was pitching well, looking good on an awful, atrocious Tigers team, of course. But it's like, you know what? Let's get Lorenz into a contender, trade it to the Phillies immediately. Not very good for that team. Makes me think empty calorie pitcher. I don't trust Lorenzen. You put him in a winning environment. He did not look good. I don't want him on my D-backs team. I'm out on Lorenzen. Tyler Mahle. How about him? Also a no. This is like a half no because I do think he's kind of interesting and I kind of want him on the D-backs team. But the reason he's a no is because he's currently on the mend for Tommy John surgery. He might not come back until like mid-season. And this is a D-backs team that I want to see compete right now. This is a team that I think can compete for a championship window right now. And this is a D-backs team that needs starters that can help the team right now. And if Tyler Miley is not going to come back until potentially mid-season, like, I can't trust Miley right now. The D-backs need starters that can help them in the immediate future, and Miley is not one of those guys. And then how does he look post Tommy John surgery? Is he going to come back and immediately get back to the level he was before? He looked really good this past season in 5 starts, and then he got hurt. I don't know if he can get back to that level. So because of that, because of the concerns post Tommy John surgery, if this was like a Mike Clevenger situation where it was the year after Tommy John, I would be okay. But just in the midst of the Tommy John surgery, I think I'm going to have to be out on Tyler Motley, unfortunately. And then the last guy that I want to discuss that you guys might think is controversial, that I kind of like, Luis Severino. Yes, on Severino for me. Projected 1 year, $14 million. Listen, you look at last year, injuries galore, and was just awful statistically. Hard to find a saving grace and silver lining with what Severino did last year. But if you had to do it, his stuff still looked good in terms of velocity and everything like that. He's the kind of guy where I'm like, if the health is right, you get in with Brent Strom, and maybe you can salvage his career. Still young enough, like 29, 30 years old, where I'm still like, yeah, there's still a little potential and hope within a Luis Severino. I still think there's talent there, and I wouldn't mind bringing him in on a low-cost 1-year deal with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now, that's it for this edition on the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. We'll be definitely talking about more free agents that the D-backs should go after. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. And don't forget to catch every D-backs pitch on their hometown broadcast when you download the Sirius XM app and search up Diamondbacks. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.